Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to this live reading. I'm just checking to make sure that we are live. I believe we are. There might be a slight delay, but we're definitely being recorded. So for any viewers who are tuning in and trying to watch this on the YouTube channel, we are recording this. It should be going live to the YouTube. But if there is a hitch and you're not able to find it, you can find it in just about, it is being recorded and it'll be up on the site a little bit later. So at the moment, because I'm hosting and, monitoring this at the same time, I actually just don't want to go into the background and look at all the technical details. I think it's much nicer to stay put with where we are. So with that said, welcome everybody to this reading of Best Small Fictions 2023. I'm going to hold up the book here. This is the book. It's an annual series, Best Small Fictions. Many of you, the viewers, will be familiar with it, but if you're not, it's a series that's been running since 2015. It's an annual series, and it represents the best of small fictions, flash fictions, microfictions from an annual series from the year prior. So it's a huge selection process that goes on. It always ends up being a whole team of editors who work on it along with the publisher, and of course the writers and the journal editors who submit. So the way it works is journal editors can nominate works. Other editors go and read many, many works, and from that we end up with a collection, usually around 100 pieces. And this year's volume was best edited by Catherine McNamara, who is originally from Australia, who lives in Italy, and has a really wonderful view on an international set of flash fictions. She's also an editor, a fiction editor at Litro magazine. And a lot of you, everyone in the room, I think will know Catherine, but a lot of the viewers might know her as well. It's edited, the series editor is Nathan Leslie, and it's really nice to say a huge thank you at the start of this to Nathan for the enormous amount of work that he puts into it. And to our publisher, who also worked very hard to get these books out. Our publisher is Altcurrent Press. So thanks to everyone on the team who makes these things happen. And today, we're celebrating some of the authors in the volume, in the 2023 volume. And it's really exciting to see you all here. We're going to just go through these set of authors. They're going to read their works. Each one will just begin and say hello. And first, a general welcome and hello to all of you. Thank you for being here. It's really wonderful to see you. And one of the really wonderful things about these kinds of readings, even when they're online and they're in Zoom and they're recorded, is that we get to hear the writers speaking in their own voices. There's something really wonderful about that because, of course, as editors and readers and writers, we're constantly reading each other on the page, and we have our own imaginings of how these works come to life. They always work on the page, of course, but the readings are really special, I think. So it's great that you can take the time to read your works, and it's wonderful that the audience watching is tuning in to hear you. So without further ado, I'm going to go to our first reader today. So our first reader is Sudha Balagopal, and Sudha's fiction straddles continents and cultures. She's tuning in today from Phoenix, Arizona, where she lives. And Sudha, welcome. Wonderful to see you. And over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here. 1 week from today, my novella on Flash will be released, and it has this story from BSF 2023 and also the one from BSF 2024. So I'm very excited to read the story. All right. Summer of 76. I love Ali MacGraw. I love her hair in the movie Love Story. Ma doesn't. She accosts us, my friends and me, as we emerge from the theater that screens English movies. I'm in a celluloid trance as she grips my arm with her work-worn fingers and drags me home, where she stands me in front of the ironing board. She stomps over to the balcony and retrieves the clothes drying on the line, 2 saris, 2 blouses, 2 petticoats, 1 house coat, 1 nightgown, 3 sets of undergarments, 2 pairs of socks, 1 bed sheet, and 3 towels. After dumping the pile on the bed, she instructs me to iron them all. Everything gets ironed in our Chennai household, even handkerchiefs. These foreign movies with kissing, whistling, and all will teach you God knows what. And this on the first day of your summer holidays? From tomorrow, you're going to science and math tutoring. Let's get you ready for class 11. She retrieves some rupees from the cupboard, tucks them inside her sari blouse. Picking up her red and white woven plastic tote bag, she announces she's leaving for the bazaar and slams the door behind her. I swallow to ease the knots in my throat, turn the knob on the iron to the highest setting. I press the hot iron on the washed towels, fold and refold them into haphazard squares. I iron the expanse of the bedsheet, crinkly, crackly from drying in the sun. Ma cannot understand love between a man and a woman, or perhaps she doesn't believe in it. Ma's marriage was arranged. Besides, my father died so long ago, she's probably forgotten what it's like to be married. I only know my father from old photographs. When I witness the beauty of relationships on film, my heart expands and knocks against my ribcage as if it wants to burst out and dance, takita, takita. Love Story's theme resounds in my head as I spread Ma's sari on the ironing board. I crave Ali MacGraw hair, parted in the middle, hanging gorgeously straight. My tresses are the opposite, too wavy, too frizzy, too wild unless confined in braids. I undo my plaits, part my hair in the middle. Separating my hair into 3 segments, I tie up 2 bunches with hair ties and lay the third over the just folded towel. I run the clothes iron over the length of my hair and repeat the painstaking process, section by section. As I iron Ma's sari, my straightened, silky soft hair swishes on my shoulders. I release the iron, stand in front of the mirror, and toss my hair left, right, left. A sharp odor tickles my nose. No, no, no! The machine's left a triangular burn mark on Ma's cotton sari. Ma will say, see, this is what happens when you fill your head with rubbish. I frantically unfurl the sari, then refold the 6-yard length, tucking the heat-singed shape into the innermost layers, finish as I hear the front door open. She sniffs. What's that smell? She sniffs again, then screams, what have you done? You've ruined your beautiful locks. Oh my God, you'll go bald. She pauses, declares her final nightmare. Who will marry you then? How will I ever find you a young man? She drops the grocery bag, leaps into action, heats coconut oil with 4 grains of rice. She rubs and rubs the warm oil into my scalp and hair. While the hair soaks, she switches on the water heater. She seats me on a stool, mixes shikakai powder with water, works the paste through the density of my hair, and finally rinses off the mixture. After, she steers me to a chair on the balcony where I must stay until my hair dries. She arranges my hip-length, wavy hair to hang curtain-like over the chair back. I sit on the balcony until the sun goes down. I sit and run the scenes from Love Story through my mind. I sit and think about Ali MacGraw's hair cascading over her shoulders. I sit and tight braid my hair, finish by securing the length with a tie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sudha. That was a wonderful reading. And it's such a lively story, really capturing the feeling that's in that scene. Really, really good. Thank you. And congratulations on your book that is coming. And we'll all look forward to that. You can share that hopefully a little bit later. Thanks very much. Okay, wonderful. Our next reader is Lucy Bonvalet. Lucy's originally from France, but she lives in Portland, Oregon. And she is a writer, a visual artist, and a teacher. And her writing moves between poetry and prose. And I think a lot of these writers work in different genre. And I think it's really wonderful to hear as they read their stories, because you can hear that attention to language, whether it's through dialogue or the flow of language or the sounds that people are using. So that's really something wonderful to hear in these best small fictions. So Lucy, welcome. Wonderful to see you. And we're looking forward to hearing your story.
Michelle, thank you so much for inviting us today to celebrate Best Small Fictions. And Sudha, I loved listening to your story. That was beautiful. So I'm reading a text that's called Signs, and it was originally published in Sand Journal. And it's partially nonfiction, and it's partially about memories of witnessing a wildfire in Spain many years ago when I was visiting my brother there. And so here it starts. I have my book with me. Fires turned the sky black on the third day. Shortly before we were evacuated, I took photographs, one part of the sky above my head black, thick, the color spread like ink in water. In the movie I watched last night, a young woman catches on fire. It takes place at night in a field of long grass by the sea in Brittany. People are gathered around a beautiful bonfire. The green hem of her long crinoline dress catches a low flame. For 1 or 2 days before being evacuated, we knew the fire. We watched the flames from a distance on the hills nearby. We tried to predict which direction it was taking, but we could not smell the flames. Our sky was just faintly veiled. In the movie, it is not clear at first whether the woman knows she is on fire. She walks slowly among people, oblivious to the flame in her dress. But her face is lit different, vibrates, juxtaposed against night. Her calm gestures become urgent, her blue eyes blacker. Why this urge to photograph a burnt sky? The moment I decided to take pictures coincided with the moment I admitted to myself that I could no longer breathe freely. The air too thick, too warm, the taste a multitude of small agonies, non-human. There is always the possibility that the young woman deliberately sets herself on fire. From our vantage point, from the other side of the bonfire, it's hard to tell. My brother was kind to me. After the police car came to ask us to evacuate, he asked me if I wanted to eat something before our long drive. I told him I was too scared to stay a bit longer. I could not see or hear the fire. I could only taste it through my eyes, my mouth, the pores of my skin. The texture of the sweat on my back was like resin. Someone watches the young woman in green crinoline from the other side of the fire. Someone knows her dress is burning but does not intervene. The lady knows she is being watched. Neither of them wants the fire to stop. As the car left Benitachell, we stopped by the side of the road from time to time, trying to see the fire and understand the scope of the black cloud. But we never saw its edges. The cloud was too large. Once the woman is rescued, she betrays herself. She acts like a criminal under arrest who has lost all hopes of freedom. She does not attempt to fake surprise or fear. She surrenders to being saved. She keeps her silence. Her body loses the urgency and strength it possessed while aflame. She does not fight. She keeps in silence, her eyes on the bonfire and beyond on the watcher, with a shared sadness and already the nostalgia of burning.
Really stunning piece of writing. Wonderful to hear you read that live. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Michelle.
Great. Our next reader is Jessica Danzer. Jessica is coming in. Oh, now I've quite forgotten, but I think maybe also from the West Coast. Interesting about Jessica is she's also a literary editor. She edits L'Esprit Literary Review, and she's also prose editor of Iron Oak Editions. And it's really interesting to note that a lot of writers in this room, but also generally who circulate through the Best Small Fiction series and other series, Best Micro Fiction, which is another really wonderful series of even shorter works, up to 400 words. A lot of us are writers and editors, and I think that's a really interesting thing to note because it's that sort of intense interest in the way stories are told, the narrative flow, and again, also language, which we're hearing in all of the stories that are shared. I did read that Jessica's current work is around grief, sexuality, ghosts, and witchcraft, which I find hugely interesting, and we'll look forward to hearing more about that, perhaps, Jessica. But welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing this story.
Hi, thank you for having me. And that was just really, both Sudha and Lucy, those were so beautiful. So this is really tough to follow. But I'll be reading this short story, The Silence, that was originally published in West Trade Review. And it was a story that kind of came to me when I was visiting Atlanta, actually, and I got lost in the woods. And so I was just kind of moving in this, I was on a run and I was moving in the woods and found myself on this kind of really kind of untamed world on the bank of a little river. So this is The Silence. We had gone to the river to test the sound. Nina brought her violin. The idea was to go to the place where the river was the widest and smoothest. It was hard to pinpoint the exact spot that would work best. The first spot we chose, the river ran too fast. The second place was too full of joggers and families, and the third spot was perfect but difficult to reach. The path hadn't been tended to, and the trees and brush grew thick and wild. We had to crawl over and under. Neither one of us made it without drawing blood. Eventually, we came to the bank. It was exactly what we were looking for. Third time's a charm, Nina said as she moved closer to the water. I hate cliches, I grumbled, even though the cliche was appropriate. It was the perfect spot. Nina had already taken out her violin. She hugged it between her shoulders and her chin, the bow in her right hand, her right arm bent and elegant. Her whole body was caught in the sun as it danced off the river. Everything glistened. She was waiting for me. I went to her and bent my knees, crouching right at the edge. The water leaped up and brushed my toes, soaking the tips of my sneakers. I straightened my back as best I could while I maintained that position, trying to keep my balance. The trick was to be as close to the water as possible, to see if the sound would skirt or skim or spread across the river, if it would dance or sink or be swallowed up. I looked up at Nina. Our eyes held each other for a moment, waiting. Then she pulled her bow across the strings as high, bright song opened up. My mouth opened with it. I breathed deep, everything expanding. And when I couldn't take it anymore, the long note of Nina's violin moving up and down along the water, I let out my scream. It scraped against the back of my throat as it tumbled up from my lungs, swelling against my tongue, before exiting my lips out into the air. We spread across the river, us as sound, Nina's violin and my scream, like melted tar or oil in a hot pan. We crossed over the water without sinking, echoing across to the other side, and then scattering to the trees. A flock of starlings rushed out of the dense forest, speckling a new color over the sky. Afterward, we stood there for a long time. We waited for it to become quiet again. We waited for our sound to dissipate and for the forest to return to the wind, the birds, the rustle of leaves as small animals moved underneath. Eventually, Nina and I turned away from the bank and crawled our way out back to the path and towards home. There, our mother would be in the kitchen, our father elsewhere. They would both be sitting in heavy silence, a suffocating kind of stillness. My mother had taken up smoking again. Neither would speak to the other. It was hard to hear anything in that house. Our brother's absence was amplified over everything else. All we could hear was the sound of his drowning in that river, at the widest and smoothest part, the sound of his dying flooding our ears. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was a really wonderful reading. And it's really worth noting, you can tell in the pieces that we've heard so far and in more to come, I always find one of the really amazing things about such compressed writing is how you can really write about very, very difficult things in life and bring them so poetically and beautifully to the page. So it's really wonderful to read such a story and to hear it. Thanks very much. And I do love how the short form allows that room, that spaciousness, to tell stories like that. That brings us to Incha Hamdani, our next reader, and very nicely moving into Incha's reading, because Incha's also an activist, politically involved, and also a writer whose work has been selected here and elsewhere. And Incha uses narrative, I think, to create a sense of understanding and healing, and we'll hear that as well. And she's coming in from Maryland, so welcome, Incha.
Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. These pieces have been really moving. So thank you, Jessica and Lucy and Sudha. And this is a true pleasure to be reading with you. So I will start. This is a flash fiction piece, and it was titled For the First Time. Woman, virgin, I chew gum. The number 217 glides across the rectangular neon monitor, matches the number on my token. I walk into a small room. Instructions on a laminated A4 printout tell me to change into the robe, lie on the examination table, place my feet in the stirrups, and wait. I do as instructed. Chew gum. A woman in a white lab coat walks in, a half smile fixed on her face. She puts on blue latex gloves. The hard, cold metal duckbill speculum pries me open. Breathe. It's done. I collect my virginity certificate, attach it to the job application, press submit. Text my mother. All done. Chew gum. Woman. Wed to the Holy Scriptures. The day my father dies, I inherit hundreds of acres of agricultural land that cannot leave the family. I am wed to the Scriptures to protect my inheritance. Wed before my father's corpse turns cold. My brother and uncle hold my thumb to the ink pad and impress it on a paper, not once, 4 times. Each impression ties the land to my name, and after I die, to my brother and his children, not mine. I am to have no children, no husband, no family. Wed to the Scriptures, I am left to mourn my rich inheritance, mourn my impoverished womb. Woman, not quite. I am 9 years old. This morning, mother gives me an unusually long bath by the stream. Her thumb presses deep into my neck. The pumice tickles my soles. Why are my grandma and my aunties visiting, I wonder? They stand together at a distance and watch me bathe. Mother's hand slips between my thighs, rubs in coconut oil in and around me. Butterfly fingers prickle me there. Something in Mother's eyes stops me from giggling. Mother dresses me in an old wrap I have never seen before. She hands me over to the older women, leans against the wall, and watches me walk off. We reach a mud hut. Inside, a woman squats on the bare floor. White wisps of hair crown her face. The women lay me down and kneel around. I ask for Mother. Grandma makes B sounds from her mouth. Cold hands hold both my ankles apart. A cut is made. B sounds drown my cries. Woman, I refuse. He beats me. I refuse. He leaves. He returns. Beats again. I refuse again. I stand tall, look him in the eye. Over my dead body, my eyes say. His fists and feet hit against soft flesh. My mouth cracks open from deep inside. Tongue rolls over, a tooth come loose. He leaves. The metal chain hits against the door. I breathe and sink. I win. My little girl is safe. There will be no wedding. My little girl is safe. There will be no child bride. The girl is safe. Woman, I am seen with him. We stand within our own shadow in a dark alley. His one arm holds me by my waist. The other pushes me from behind against him. I nibble the side of his neck. That is when I see them see us. My heart snaps. I hurry home. I confess. Tell Mother. Father listens from outside the room. Mother cries. Father says nothing. He locks my door from the outside. Hours go by. Then the door opens. I sit up. The sound pierces my ear before the bullet burns through my chest. They enfold my body in a shroud, twist its end above my head and under my feet like a toffee's. My body thumps into a dugout, not a grave, an unmarked pit. My death is added to the numbers killed for honor that year. Woman, a bride, third wife to a man older than my father. He has small eyes and the largest house in the community. He walks slowly to the bed where I sit in my red bridle. Mother's organza silk scarf bordered with gold lace covers my head. Pudgy fingers push my chin up. He grunts, sits on the edge of the bed, loosens his shalvar's drawstring. The flaccid penis shows. He pushes my head down. I take it in my mouth. His hand moves my head over it. I feel a warm spit on my tongue. I keep my eyes shut, squeezed tight shut. Woman, afraid, my fear as thick as the jade that engulfs my body. The jade, my captor and my accomplice, trails behind me on the marble floor. My bare feet slither over the stone and give out a silent hiss. I step out of one door and into another. Take what is my right for the first time. I settle into the leather seat, turn the key in the ignition. Feet dance on the pedals. The car rolls. Wheels race faster. The power of motion surges through me. The expanse of the road ahead fills me. I break through all barriers for the first time. Sirens and spinning red-blue lights encircle me. I do not stop. I will not stop. I drive for the first time. Woman, Thank you.
Thank you so much, Incha. Again, an amazing story to hear read out loud with such also wonderfully beautiful controlled pacing. I imagine not a very easy story to read out loud as well. So thank you very much. A lot of these stories, a lot of the small fictions tend to be, sometimes they're about family, they're about culture, as you've heard in the previous stories. They're also often really wonderful at capturing a place and the people in it. And that brings us to our next reader, Lorette Luzajic, who is coming in from Canada, although I think currently elsewhere. Lorette is a writer and an editor. She's also a visual artist and has had her work really around the world. And a lot of these writers, as you can hear from their readings, they have a lot of them do work across, not only across genre, but across geographic spaces. And I think that's also really quite wonderful and interesting to note. So Lorette, thank you so much for being here and welcome. And we're looking forward to hearing your story.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. It's just wonderful to be here. These stories were truly riveting. Thank you all for coming to share those with us. And of course, thank you to Michelle and Nathan and everyone on the team for all the hard work that you do. This story is called The Triminic Man, and I'm thankful to Claire McQueen at McQueen's Quinterly for publishing it. It was written, as most of my things are, out of a painting, and the joy of the ekphrastic process is you never know what kind of story is going to come to life, so I didn't see this one coming at all. The jester rode into town on a rusty penny farthing with a pink parrot on his shoulder and an entourage of beagles. He had a thick Slavic accent and sad eyes and long pointy boots. He always wore a stretchy jumpsuit borrowed from Neil Diamond with a matching red swimming cap. He was a swirl of small bells, tinkling and jangling. "I am Gaska," he told us. The crusty kids, the other ones without mothers, studded and stuttering, sinking against the Walgreens, slurping back cough syrup, were sure he was tripping the way they were, so they christened him the Triminic Man. He sold various medicaments and tinctures, so the name stuck. For myself, I called him by that nickname in my own heart, because there was a salve in his strange presence. To keep his troop of wildlife wagging and twittering, the Triminic Man hauled a ghillie wagon through strip mall parking lots, pawning oddments and bric-a-brac, plastic floral arrangements, an apothecary of herbal rubs and gooey unguents, along with assorted wrenches. He had a rickety A-frame boasting remedies and sharpening knives. We were a town of steel and churches, of ketchup and lager and aluminum lunch boxes. Gaska wasn't the first eccentric peddler or tinker. We assumed he lived with the others on the encampment between the bridge and the canning factory. The mills had long labored under Rusnak and Pole and Slovak hands, and we all had colorful grandparents who'd been selling something somewhere for a little extra. Even old Heinz famously got his start hawking horseradish sauce grown in his sidewalk garden from a wheelbarrow. One morning, after finishing his shift bottling baby pablum, Dad said his pruning shears were getting dull. Gaska could sharpen them for him. We piled into the Datsun, eager to visit the stranger and his menagerie of dogs and to sift through his trinkets in search of treasure. "Good morning, Gaska," Dad called out, letting our presence be known over the bedlam of barking beasts. They flocked to us then, lapping fingers and faces, rolled on the asphalt with bellies skyward for our scritches. "Hello, young ladies," the man said. He was gangly and awkward, but when he started in on the scissors with the whetstone, he was precise and elegant as a ballerina. I poked a stick into an old birdcage to stir a flutter from some finches, saw Daddy flash his behave yourself eyes my way. He and the man were talking as if they were old friends. My little sister had a ratty old puppet on her hand, rifling through a broken flower pot full of marbles with the other. The romantic streak blooming in me that summer desperately longed for some kind of love story. There was an old box of letters, but I couldn't read their language. A postcard inside was old as the hills and covered in trees. This is the Krakow forest, Gaska said, suddenly beside me. I will read it to you. I froze. After a pause, he gently pulled the postcard from my trembling palm. There was a current in his brief brush against me, but he seemed oblivious to it. His eyes were pools of melancholy and tenderness. Under a bundle of letters was another postcard, this time of an old painting. It was a red clown of some kind, with chiseled features and a close-cropped beard, eyes downcast. I looked up sharply. It was a picture of Gaska himself. I saw a flicker of cognizant trust pass from his eyes to mine. The jester knew that I saw him. I felt something boiling at the base of my spine, and a profound sense of destiny washed over me. Stansick, the postcard said. I shoved it into my father's hand, already holding a medley of marbles and jacks. That it? Dad asked, and I nodded, flustered, my cheeks blazing. No one seemed to notice. You have an eye for art, young lady, the Triminic man said. This is a painting by Jan Matejko, one of the finest in Poland. He opened a brittle old volume and pointed a lean claw at pictures of a battle scene and an astronomer. I didn't care about them. I only wanted the one with Stansick. I only wanted him. On the way home, Dad marveled over the things he had seen, like the 8 fine bone china teacups filled with kibble and some old bagpipes. He chuckled when he told us how he'd invited Gaska to the plant to fill out a job application. Why would I do that? The odd man had replied. I work for the king. I rode my bike to wherever Gaska was for the rest of that summer, choosing random gewgaws as keepsakes and hanging on his every story. I wanted him to tell me about the world. He smelled softly of whiskey and chopped wood, and it made me weak. I took to feeding the dogs and cleaning out the bird cages just to have a reason to be there, and he paid me with bibelots and baubles and home-steeped iced tea. That fall they found him, slumped and silent in his favorite wooden chair, hands folded. Dad put his big hand on my shoulder when he brought the bad news, told me how my friend was much older than he looked, that he'd gone peacefully after a small stroke. I didn't cry. What I felt was deeper than tears, something breaking away. I knew I was going to leave this place forever. I took all those tiny treasures and drowned them in the Allegheny River, everything except the little painting of the jester. I put that into the small red prayer book Mother used to read from when she was ill, something I would always have with me. It was his soul, and he'd meant for me to keep it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A great reading and so much imagery. It's interesting. One can tell that you're really engaged with the visual arts as well, because the imagery is so strong there. Really wonderful. I think we can all imagine this story so well. Thanks very much. Our next reader is Pamela Painter. And a lot of you will know Pam already. She's been published many, many times. She's had 4 Pushcart Prizes. She's award-winning in many ways. And a very exciting thing about her work is that some of her work has been staged in theater, and a story called Doors is being turned into a short film. So it's very exciting. Lots of, again, all of these writers have so many multiple talents and things that are happening. So Pam, wonderful to see you here. Welcome, and we look forward to your story.
Thank you. I'm so sorry to be late. I just got down here today, and my cat found a mouse and was running around after it. Anyway, it's chaos. But also, Lorette, I realized I have your collage of a cat here on my shelf. Anyway, so thank you for including me. A wonderful group, wonderful stories. And my story was published in South Florida Poetry Journal, So Flo Pojo, chosen by Fran Witt. And anyway, here it is. Sorrow everywhere. At first, it was just light ash drifting down from somewhere. We didn't look up and we didn't ask. Children drew cartoons in the ash on the sidewalks, and my neighbor said it was good for cleaning windows, that and crumpled newspaper. For a week, her windows glinted with the dazzle of clean glass. Then the ash wasn't light anymore, and it seemed to be drifting sideways. My neighbor stood at our fence and called over that it was good for her roses and probably for my hyacinths. The children measured out a hopscotch grid in the driveway and dusted off round stones. My husband lost interest in football and blamed it on poor TV reception. Nothing seemed threatening. We went about our lives to our offices and warehouses and schools. Newscasters swooped and glided in front of their digital weather maps, wearing brightly patterned dresses or silly ties. The government assured us that mail delivery would not be interrupted and that AI crews were assembled and at the ready. Ready wasn't alarming. Banks ran out of bills larger than 20. Small skirmishes in countries whose names we never knew came to a standstill, and larger wars in countries we didn't remember slowly ground to a stop. You would think these global developments would bring some degree of celebration, but that didn't assuage our grief. But grief is not quite the right word for what we were feeling. My neighbor said this when she knocked on our door. She has always been helpful. We sat in the kitchen over coffee and laid over wine, and she said it probably wouldn't last. This sorrow everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam. Wonderful to have you here. I hope the cat and mouse situation is under control. I don't actually think you were late to our reading. You sort of came in and it all worked out well. So
Good.
very much.
Thank you.
And really interesting what you can tell by Pam's story if you're just listening. Pam's, of course, is much shorter than some of the others. Best Small Fictions includes stories up to 1,000 words. And some of the stories you've heard are kind of right up against that mark, certainly longer than 500 words. But Pam's is actually quite a short piece, fitting just on one page. But what's really interesting, and of course you all know this, but I'm saying this for the watchers and people who will listen to this, the really wonderful thing about Small Fictions is the way they do capture a whole world. And that's quite amazing the way we can do that and the way all of you do that. So our next reader has an interesting title because the title's just one word and it's the name of the character. And of course, even in Small Fictions, we can capture a person and a character so richly, which you've also heard in some of the previous stories. And I'll let him introduce his story, but the next reader is David James Poissant. And he is the author of a couple novels that have been listed in New York Times bestseller lists. And he's the editor, one of the editors of, or maybe the editor of the Florida Review. And his work is widely published, again, like so many in the room, also an editor, a very acute reader and writer. So welcome, David. Wonderful to see you here. And I'm looking forward to hearing you read this story.
Thank you, Michelle. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Coming through loud and clear. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I'm just stunned by the readings. And this story, I just owe a great thanks to Brett and Marlies of Ghost Parachute, who published this story. Who've published a number of my stories. They've been of course, a longtime huge supporter of flash fiction, and just a great supporter of the local literary scene where I live here in Orlando, Florida. So yeah, this is my story, Eddie. Eddie is going to be a lapidary, so he says. But Eddie is going to be a lot of things. I ask Eddie what a lapidary is, and Eddie says a lapidary is someone who cuts gemstones, polishes, cuts, sometimes engraves. On Reddit, Eddie says lapidaries advertise their cuts. He says there's this school in Utah, or maybe Nevada, where they turn rough stones into diamond rings. All Eddie needs is $5,000 for a faceting machine and $3,000 to take the class. $2,000 for flight and hotel, but no more than 10 grand tops. This machine is the best, Eddie says. We sit in rocking chairs. We sit on my front porch, not drinking, and Eddie shows me pictures from a catalog. Eddie is my best friend, has been since we were 5, and now we're 35. For 5 years, I've taught history, college level, on the tenure track. Next year, I go up for tenure. Next month, Eddie flies to Utah or Nevada if his parents lend him the $10,000. Before he was going to be a lapidary, Eddie was going to be a dog groomer. He was fired after his scissors took off a miniature pinscher's ear. Eddie superglued the ear back on, but backward. The dog owner leaving Petco noticed before she'd even left the lot. Before he was going to be a dog groomer, Eddie was going to be a snail farmer. Only the snails he had shipped from France turned out to be illegal in Florida, so Eddie ate the evidence. Before snail farming, Eddie took up falconry. The falconry phase did not end well. Before falconry, Eddie was a cater waiter. He stole booze, puffed glue, hid from his manager in the bathroom stalls, and one time fucked a groom. Around the time he got let go from cater waitering, Eddie asked me if I thought he had a drinking problem. I told Eddie he very much had a drinking problem, and Eddie called me a bad friend and told me to go fuck myself. And because when Eddie's drunk, he says things he doesn't mean, or means but doesn't mean to say. But Eddie's been saying things he doesn't mean since we were 5. So when he called me a bad friend, I told Eddie to stay away for a week. And when the week was up, Eddie knocked on my door and he said he was sober. And I said, no shit. And he said, no shit, but you can still drink in front of me. And I said, I will never drink in front of you again. And I have not. Being unemployed keeps Eddie sober, Eddie says, and I believe him. This time, Eddie says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a lapidary. The rockers on the front porch creak under the weight of us, and Eddie talks about flights from Pensacola to Utah or Nevada. Round trip would be nice, he says, but he'd settle for a layover in Dallas or Fort Worth. Eddie's parents might not lend the money on account of the falcon is dead, and Eddie ate the snail farm, but Eddie says if he asks real nice, his aunt in Jacksonville might bankroll the whole thing. He could pay her back plus interest, could pay her back double in a month, is how lucrative the gemstone business is, Eddie says. Before he was a cater waiter, Eddie took up juggling. And before he took up juggling, Eddie learned a magic trick or two. Before magic, Eddie gave front yard haircuts. And before front yard haircuts, Eddie tried and failed to end his life. After Eddie failed to end his life, Eddie tried again and failed, this time for real. If I had the money, I'd lend it, I say. I'd give it to you. I know that, Eddie says. Don't you think I know that? Our rockers rock. The porch boards squeal. Sitting in my bank account right now is just over 10 grand, but Eddie knows better than to ask. Sure is a pretty faceting machine, Eddie says. He turns the page. He holds the catalog aloft so I can look. I nod and we watch Pensacola turn to night. Frog song and cicada hiccup. A mile away, waves trace a beach too far from here to here. Sometimes I imagine Eddie on that beach. Not just Eddie, every Eddie, lapidary Eddie with his faceting machine, falconer Eddie with his bird of prey, snail Eddie and magic Eddie, and Eddie gluing the ears of small breed dogs back on. All those Eddies, those he's been and those he'll never be, crowding a wet and crowded Florida shore. Pulling a dove from his pocket, spinning a stone to catch the light, searching the horizon for what comes next. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. Wonderful to hear you read that. I've read it many times on the page, and your reading, it has those moments of levity, which I think make the story really shine, but also how it's so much about something bigger than that, and the friendship that's really beautifully portrayed there. So thank you very much. Great to hear. Our next reader is from Enugu in Nigeria. This is Emmanuel Nwafor, and we're really delighted to have you reading your work. Emmanuel is also a poet as well, and you'll hear that again. As we hear in so many of these stories, there's a sensitivity to language and a wonderful flow of words and sounds. And most significantly, Emmanuel's poetry was shortlisted in 2020 for the Bloomsbury Poetry Prize. So again, many award-winning writers, really highly recognized for a variety of forms. So Emmanuel, thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to hearing your work. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoy being
All right, I'm just going to ask very quickly, and I'm sorry to interrupt. Can everyone hear Emmanuel? Because I can't hear very well. Can you hear? Right. So let's see. I don't know if you can. I'll try to turn up volumes. Maybe just do a little test. Let's see if we can hear you better.
Can you hear me?
Better, yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. It's 11:59 p.m. Nigeria. It's really dark and really quiet. I really enjoy listening to everybody's stories. Stories have been really captivating, really interesting, really beautiful. I wrote my story, it's flash fiction. I wrote it in 2022, after the lockdown. It came about as a challenge with some friends, and it's a collection of scenes from my childhood, just thoughts and moments, and it's been beautiful ever since. And I really want to thank you for selecting this story to be in Best Short Fiction, and I'm really thankful. So the name of my story is A Mouth Filled with White. You bought a cluster of jasmines from the old florist who has a flower fixed eternally in his hair. The florist on Michael Okmara Road. Flower pots with polka dots of water outside the shade. Many flowers with colored petals and fat bulbs on a table. A pair of green garden chairs. The jasmines were wrapped in last week's newspaper. I unwrapped the paper already creased where you held them and smiled at the muddy print. I brought the flowers to my face. Petals were white and warm and slightly disheveled because your car windows are always down. I kept smiling at the jasmines. I would keep them in the blue vase with daisies around the leaf. I called you after I had filled the vase with water and vinegar and dipped the flowers there. I wish the vase were clear so I could see the stalks crisscrossed and naked in the water, slender like your legs under our pool in Jaws. I took a picture and sent it to you. You laughed with an emoji, and I called you after. I don't know what to do with these jasmines. The old man picked them for you. I love the vase you have put them in. They will die either way. You sighed. I know you also pinched the bridge of your nose. Just leave them there in water and let them be flowers. My father believed flowers did not die because God watched over them. God sprinkled dew on them, gave them sun, and then in turn opened in gratitude to him. My father believed this about the Arizona hedge he tended into a circle in the center of our house. Sometimes he held my hand and walked me away from it, up to the fence, to watch the flowers from there. He would say, pointing, "Don't you see? From here they look like burning stars. I swear I would eat these flowers first before anything else can." And we would laugh. My father loved these flowers. He believed nurturing them was the job God gave to him when nothing else would. God does not care about work experience. He gave them life. He just needs me to be careful and kind. We went outside one evening to see how a sudden solar flare had burned a section of the hedge. and something formerly so concrete in my father's face evaporated like mist. The leaves browned and crackled when we touched them. The flowers shriveled to thin threads in their stalks like they had burned where they stood. They broke off and fell in one brown dead piece when my father touched them. But that was not the worst solar flare, said my father. He no longer tended to the flowers after that. The flowers grew wild, their branches mangled, dangerous stalks jutted out, and the circle he had made became something monstrous. Nah, come and cut these flowers now, we begged him. Leave them for God, they are his own. God never came. My mother's machete came down on the Izora. They wiped, they whipped her skin in resistance. Many red flowers littered the ground like blood from a massacre. My father watched from the veranda and died in his sleep. I look at the jasmines, to watch them in bloom, in fragile nakedness, waiting for their necks to drop and for petals to litter the floor cannot be all I learned from my father. I move close to them and exhale. The petals ruffle like feathers. I pull them from the vase. They are still white and warm, and one by one, I fill my mouth with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful last image. That is an image that has stayed with me for a long, long time since I first read that story. And again, as always, really great to hear these read in the original voice, in the writer's own reading. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Our next reader is Eric Scott Tryon, and he's coming in from San Francisco, where he lives and edits and writes. His work has also been selected in many different literary journals online, also for some awards. And he is also the founding editor of Flash Frog. So thanks very much for coming today, Eric, and we look forward to hearing you share your story.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for putting this all together. This has been a fantastic reading, and I'm honored to be a part of it. This story originally was published in a magazine called Cease Frogs. I got frogs on the brain. Cease Cows, different animal. Cease Cows, which is a great magazine. And it is called Monologue to a Tattoo Artist. We were so fucking cool. We blasted the Pixies out of car windows, quoted Reservoir Dogs start to finish, and smoked unfiltereds like our lives depended on it. Me and Sarah and me, we did everything together. We broke into hotel hot tubs after midnight, put on the moldy peaches and fucked in the middle of the day with the blinds open. We wanted to be seen, to be heard, to let our cool get caught up in the wind, trickle into air vents and cracked windows. Maybe let the fog carry it across the bridge. So when she first started getting headaches, we thought it must be the cigarettes and switched over to Parliaments. Yeah, P-Funks, that'll keep her level. Sarah always said we were old enough to be free, but young enough to be stupid. So we went to parties we weren't invited to and bounced early from the ones we were, or didn't go at all. Didn't matter. Sitting atop Twin Peaks, staring at sharing a whiskey bottle and a pint of Ben & Jerry's was it. It's all there was and all there needed to be. We dangled our legs off the edge of the world and watched the stars melt to butter. But that Saturday, when she fainted for the fourth time, we knew we were in some real shit. So we went full straight edge, no smoke, no drink. Even though I could still bench press the moon, I did it with her, switched up our game. All-night picnics in Dolores Park, kung fu movies in the old abandoned church, hopping on the first BART that slid into the station, taking it to the end of the line, any line, find our way home the hard way. Then we went absolute batshit crazy, waiting for the test results from the lab. 1 week, they said, but by day 9, our mantra was, fuck the lab. It was our answer to everything. Hey, baby, what do you want for dinner? I don't know, maybe tacos, but also maybe fuck the lab, shit like that. We used to do prairie fire shots at a bar called The Lab down in the Haight. We'd stay after closing the night's Z-Man tended bar, drinking, listening to the unicorns, and playing dominoes for quarters until the sun came up. So, hey man, no halos or angel wings or none of that heaven shit. She would have hated that. Just as long as her name is so black and bold that the ink bleeds down into my bones and spreads through my body until I can taste it in the back of my mouth. And then just make my arm look cool, man. Make it look so fucking cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love the pacing of that. It reads so well on the page, but also hearing you read it, it's one of those things where it just clips along. And of course, the title, the monologue to a tattoo artist, you really capture the mood and the dynamic of what's happening in this scene. So that's, yeah, really, really fun, really good to hear. You all will have noticed that a lot of the stories are written in first person, which does something really wonderful about capturing that voice. Of course, every single story here has a particular voice. Even with the story Eddie, which was also first person, but about a different character. And I really like that, the way that we can hear the voice so strongly. Again, hear it now in person, but also read it on the page. And that brings us to the last reader of our session today. And this is Addie Tsai. And Addie is coming in from Virginia, where they teach at William and Mary, and also is writing between fiction and poetry and other forms as well, and is a co-editor of fiction for Anomaly, and also the founding editor-in-chief for the journal Just Femme and Dandy. And I love that. Addie, welcome. And I look forward to hearing your story, as I'm sure we all do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really wonderful to hear everyone's pieces. This is called Swooning for Succulents, and it was published in Alocasia, which is a queer journal about plants. So the first time I fell in love with a succulent was the first time I fell in love with a woman. She had a mess of bright orange curls, the same shade as my favorite summertime drink. By this time she introduced me to succulents, we were no longer in love, but in complicated friendship. I'd like to think that I was her most prized subject, even though I'm well aware that this was what led to our disillusion. Either she or another woman she loved to capture, a well-known belly dancer, in the round black lens, her magnified eye, gained temporary access to a house that belonged to the rich. I couldn't for the life of me tell you what they did to acquire such treasures, but I remembered that the house they owned had a magnificent pool surrounded by succulent gardens framed in wood. The red-headed girl took photos of the belly dancer and me separate and also together, nude except for the sweat that dripped down our pale skin, the sun determined to redden it by the day's end. I couldn't tell you what it was that drew me to the succulent's bulbous leaves that looked animated, or at the very least edible, soft yet durable. When I proposed to a man a few years later, I spent hours scouring the internet for succulent bouquets. I was thrilled there was such a thing, but ultimately ended up going with a small bouquet handpicked at a farm a drive's distance from where we wed, and more affordable. My mother had always had what she called a purple thumb, killing every growing thing in her path. She was prone to believe that every tragedy that befell her was genetic. And so even my father's green thumb transformed our backyard into a tropical paradise. I never did buy plants, except for a grocery store orchid or two. But then when my marriage wilted slowly and all at once, and COVID kept lives out when I needed them most to be in, I drove myself to my favorite nursery and bought the succulent that asked for me to come closer. A friend offered me a cactus plant and a couple of other succulents, but it was this one that decided to thrive alongside me, slowly, steadily, like all of us. Thanks.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic reading as our last reading of the day. And that last line, I feel like that's something we're going to hold on to and remember. It was really wonderful to hear you read that. So that concludes our reading today. I want to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to be here. All of your stories are real treasures, and of course, they're beautiful and wonderful to see in the book. For viewers, you can find the book, Small Fictions 2023 at Alt Current Press online, and you can purchase it and take it home with you. I did notice that in our readings, and I was doing the same, it was nice to hear the readings and to hear the voice, but also to read along. And I noticed a lot of you were doing that as well. because it really does just bring that kind of texture and voice to the page. So for anyone who's interested in the book, I encourage you to get it because it's filled with about 100, I think 109 in this year's volume, stories. So the last thing I'd like to say is thank you to all of you again. Really wonderful to see you here and to meet you in our Zoom. The other thing is for everyone watching and for you as well, this is the very last reading for our 2024 Festival of Flash. This is an online series of panels and readings that we do in the days leading up to, usually in about the week leading up to National Flash Fiction Day in New Zealand, which is where I'm coming in from. You might be able to hear, I'm not originally from New Zealand, but I arrived here in 2008, and it is where I call my home. And in New Zealand, we've been celebrating National Flash Fiction Day since 2012. So this year, it's always on June 22nd, which is today in New Zealand. I know it's not quite today yet for you, but in New Zealand, it's June 22nd. So I'm about to dash off and do other things for our celebration. We have 6 or 7 celebrations that take place simultaneously around the country in all of our major centers, celebrating New Zealand's short fictions, but also internationally. And we can do that because of our online connections and the way we all meet each other like this. So thank you very much. Everyone can find all of the panels and this reading as well, the recording, on our Festival of Flash page, which is at nationalflash.org. Pretty easy to find. And with that, I will bid you all a good night to where you are and a good day for anyone tuning in from New Zealand. Thank you all so much once more for Best Small Fictions, and thanks for being part.